of Springs is big. They do water, they do power, they do wastewater, they have natural gas, and they have 1,800 employees. Within their organization, they have, and I wanted to bring this forward because it's just a very interesting model. They have a workforce planning and development manager, and then underneath that, they have a technical craft development group, they have a business skills development group, they have a workforce planning group, and an instructional design group. So the technical craft training unit handles 12 apprenticeship programs and all their health and safety and craft-specific training. They also are running 12 different apprenticeships programs. So look at this. These are some of the mission-critical classifications that Baywork is concerned with. So they've got almost 70 apprentices. So they're doing candidate development in-house. They also have all these different kind of journey level programs. So they're providing safety training, they're doing environmental training, and they mean things like if you've got a chlorine spill, how you avoid environmental problems, how to use industrial equipment like backhoes and bucket trucks, craft-specific skills like power pole climbing, and general course mandates like emergency response. With their apprenticeship program, they're also working with their community colleges so that the people who are in the apprenticeship program are getting the combination of the training and experience that they provide and are also able to attend courses in the local community colleges. They've also got a business skills unit. So this would be the set of people who would be providing the leadership training or the customer service training. So this is, in this group, they've got 1 supervisor and they've got 6 professional trainers. One thing you might have noticed is they've got more staffing in their technical training group than they have in their business skills unit. And this has ever been dazzling to me. They have an instructional design unit. So what happens is that in their organization, somebody says, my staff don't know how to do this. They really do need to know how to do this. We've got to design some training so they will know how to do this. And they've got a set of people that's what they do for a living. They've got 6 instructional designers and a supervisor. So they work with the person who needs the training to figure out what mode of training or type of training would be most useful to them, and then to develop a proposal for either to purchase it or get e-learning or develop a new training tool or whatever. But they've got people on staff that's what they do all the time for a living. So this chart here summarizes what this work unit looks like. They've got a manager, they've got the 9 people doing the developing the training and providing the training for technical crafts, 7 people dealing with business skills. They've got a 5-person workforce planning unit. That's what they do for a living. They've got their instructional design unit, and then they've got administrative support. So they have 32 people in this organization that this is what they do, make sure their staff actually know what they're doing. So I asked him to backtrack a little bit and tell me what problems were they trying to solve when they went to this model. So an example was that they had duplication and inconsistency in the training provided. So they had 4 different business units who were dealing with water or wastewater or power, different aspects of it. They might actually need similar skills in those work units, but be providing either duplicating training or very dissimilar training. Sometimes they found that they were developing materials that then weren't used. And the Jim Fiedler, that Jim, mentioned the topic of you can have people revving up, putting a lot of energy into developing training materials, but if you don't have an organizational commitment that outlasts that manager goes, the new manager said, I never wanted any training on that anyway. They were having that kind of a problem. And then they needed to separate training issues from employee performance and accountability issues. because what they were finding was that people would say, well, this isn't working so well, the staff need more training. Well, maybe actually what they needed was a little more supervision, a little more accountability. So you need to differentiate those different issues. And they lacked a business-like process for defining what kind of training they needed and the appropriate best process for providing that training. So they went to a more centralized training approach that would provide both technical and business kind of training for the whole organization, have a consolidated budget, because really, truly, it's hard to track what all is being spent on training, especially if it's sort of split and proliferated through the organization, and that provided a centralized instructional design function and cross-functional trainers. Isn't this the coolest thing? I just think this is so interesting that they did it. I am always so interested when people take really different organizational approaches to things. They really took up the university model. This sponsorship council on the top is a combination of the deans of these different schools. So they consider themselves to have a school of training on technical field operations. They have a school of training on technical plant operations for safety and environmental, for customer relations, and for organizational and professional development. So one thing that's very interesting about that is that there's a dean of each one of these schools. That dean is not one of the trainers. That dean is one of the operational people who really needs this training to work. So, for example, the person who's the head, the dean of the technical field operations also runs their water department. So this is not her full-time job, but what's happening is that all these deans are from line management, they're from operations. They then become part of the sponsorship council, so that whereas the head of the workforce and planning development work unit is a member of the sponsorship council, basically this is a set of people and of deans who were appointed by their executive level to say, you do something operationally all the time, but this is the other thing that you've also got to do, is be on the advisory committee that decides what kind of training is needed for people. So this is a very unusual model. I haven't seen it done elsewhere. So as I mentioned, the dean of school is nominated by the board of directors. They bring in other mid-level line managers to participate in the process, and then they have 1 to 2 people who are from the training unit who participate, but they're not essentially making the decisions about what training is needed or what the priorities are. That's really coming from line management with the training unit providing a service function. So the example that's here is that at one point they had 14 different courses on forklift training. So they ranged from an hour to a few days, and there was duplication, and it just kind of didn't make sense. And then in terms of their record keeping, everybody was getting the same credit whether they had an hour or a few days. So they decided, well, what do we actually need for forklift training? Decided it was a four-hour course, and that was what they were going to provide, and so they avoided duplication by going that direction. They also found that different parts of the organization were going to the same vendors separately to get training on how to use certain kinds of equipment. So they went to the approach, instead of saying, no, you'll provide us training as a group, to the different people in the different parts of the organization that need it. So they've got a whole training request model where